Welcome to the No Switch Fitness Podcast, where we aim to combine education and anecdotal experience that will allow you to take no off switch in the pursuit of results. Today, we are joined by Mads and Corey of Raw Coaching. Let's hop into today's episode.
All right, guys, welcome
What's going on?
to the No Switch Fitness Podcast.
We're pleasure to be here in person.
Coming all the way from the UK. We really appreciate you guys coming out. For those of you who don't know, Mads and Corey are from the UK. They own a coaching business called Raw Coaching. And Corey is 7 days out? 7 days out of the Arnold. So we're really excited for him and just excited to have both of y'all on. So.
I'm surprised he's not sat here with his top off, to be honest.
Everyone is going to have to bear with me. Cognitive engagement is down there. But this time in 7 days, I will be an IFBB pro, classic bodybuilder.
Yeah.
And rolling over to the pro show because someone is going to pull some strings to get me there.
Even if you got to stay here, we'll make it happen.
100%. It's very, very good to be in God's country, in the King of Texas's boudoir at this very moment in time. So thank you for having us.
Of course, brother. I know, Mads, you've been to the States. Have you been to the States before?
I spent 24 hours, 36 hours in Atlanta because I missed my connecting flight.
So it was in an airport. So this is like your first experience.
First experience, and it's a very, very good one. We did New York. We hit at Bev's gym, powerhouse, but nothing compares so far to where we are now.
Yeah. And Ohio's not going to be much better. I'm going to go ahead and tell you that right now.
I don't have high expectations, apart from the fact that I'm going to win my pro card there. So that's as good as it gets.
It's mad to think you're in the same country. You're in America, and it's so different.
Yeah.
And New York's so different to Texas.
Yeah. It's drastically different. And it's like the cultures are so different too, just the people and everything. And you'll see when you go to Ohio, like it's just like another different way of living. It's just a little bit different there.
We were speaking to Branch earlier in Destination and talking about environment. So important. And it's hard not to picture yourself here, as with the both of us being in a position where we can literally live, work, breathe anywhere in the world.
Yeah.
You come to a place, spend time with you, go to Destination, you're just like, you need to manage that environment so well.
Yeah, and the people around you are so important. And we were talking about this earlier, like we feel like our circle is not ever in the same place, right? It's like we got to Dubai and it was like so many of us there, and it was so nice to finally get to meet y'all, right? Because I'd seen y'all on social media, obviously knew who you guys were. And it's just like you click it, you hit it off, right? Like straight off the bat. And so it was awesome that you guys decided to come here.
Yeah, it's difficult because we spend so much time talking to different people, and your community, I think, in bodybuilding is small but so spread out.
Yeah.
And you don't often get the opportunity to actually come together with the people that you want to spend time with.
Yeah.
Because we're all a bit strange. Like, we're from the UK. There's not that many people around us that do what we do, that like what we do, that we spend time with. So getting the opportunity to come out and, like, obviously thanks for having us, but it's amazing. Like, it's why we travel.
Yeah.
It's nice.
I think it's a blessing and a curse. Like, we'll come away from being here, go to Ohio, and I'll be pissed. Like, I was pissed after Dubai. I was just like, I'm going to Texas. I'm moving in with Luke. I don't care what you're doing, Mads. Mads is like, all right, well, you're not doing that. Like, I know I'm not doing that, but that's what I want to do.
Oh, man. Well, I think for the conversation today, you guys are both very passionate about your athlete journeys, but also passionate about coaching, right? And I think, Corey, just to kind of start with you, like your journey's been an interesting one, to say the least. I think it's one that the audience would kind of like to start. So start where you feel like, but I know potentially the perspective from the hospital bed would be very valuable for everybody that's listening.
Brief synopsis. Okay, so introduction, starting off at elite level rugby.
Yeah.
Strength and conditioning being a massive part of that, understanding that although I wanted to continue to pursue my rugby career on a professional basis, on an international basis, it didn't work out like that. It's the way that high level sports goes, as you know. And the transition to bodybuilding was really, really easy because I already loved that, a bit, my ability to become a better version of myself every single day. Then the pursuit of peak performance comes with big consequences, certainly in bodybuilding, certainly being assisted, androgen exposure, wanting to be the best you possibly can. And unfortunately, the reality is more always brings more, right? More reward definitely brings more risk and more exposure. So fast forward 7 years worth of competing under guidance, should we say, which is why I'm so passionate about my coaching and my ability to make the community that we spend so much time in and I love so much safer, give people longevity. But yeah, fast forward 7 years with competing, exposure, and I was dead in a hospital bed. Got cardiomyopathy. For everyone who doesn't know what that is, my left ventricle wall is thickened due to overexposure to androgens. Also, my genetic predisposition to heart disease as a whole, which I wish I would have known when starting bodybuilding, but unfortunately, all of my previous family members had died from heart disease, so I didn't obviously know them. And fast forward from there, so that was 13 months ago.
Man, that's a quick turnaround.
It had to be.
Yeah.
Genuinely.
Why?
If bodybuilding was to have been taken away from me in that hospital bed, and no word of a lie, I had my first echocardiogram, and I mean, you know what I'm like, I'm happy-go-lucky, take things not seriously at all, don't take anything seriously at all, apart from my bodybuilding, funny enough. And I said to the nurse who did my echocardiogram, I said, so I'm alive then? And her response was, you're going to be here for a very, very long time, young man. And I was like, oh shit. Now, I want to be a super heavyweight, open class, big bastard bodybuilder. That's why I first started training. I wanted to be the guy that walked in the gym. I'm sure for everyone listening, male or female, they're going to have their own ideas of what actually sparked that interest. But for me, it was just I had a visual of me walking into the gym and people being like, who is that guy?
Yeah.
Right. And that comes with a bit of size and a bit of presence, which obviously requires some muscle. And I went, and after she left, I went to the bathroom and just cried, genuinely cried. And the first picture that I opened when I went on my phone was a picture of Nick Walker, right? I remember the fucking shoes he was wearing in the picture, and I thought, I will die before I get to that level. Yeah. And that's the reality. I stood on stage as a super at the Arnold's 2 years previously, my rookie debut in Open, and I placed 6th, and I was 107 kilos. Yeah. Tiny. These boys had 20 kilos worth of muscle.
Small for a super.
100, very, very small. And I thought, right, if I need 20 kilos worth of muscle, actual stage weight, and my material.
How are you going to chase that, right?
I'm married. I was engaged at the time. How selfish would that be to be able to pursue that, right?
Which kind of brings it back to you. Like, what was your perspective as he's going through this, and like how he's experiencing that, how you're experiencing this? And
it's really difficult because obviously Cory in that scenario is all he's thinking about is everything that encompasses who he is, right? Which is like his bodybuilding, his coaching, his identity, because all he does is bodybuild, right? He doesn't have a separate job. It's not something he does on the side as a bit of a hobby. Like, that's who he is. So for me, understanding that he would potentially have to come away from that is quite daunting, because it's more from a mental health perspective, like what that does. If you suddenly lost everything that you thought was your identity, then who are you? What are you doing? And he didn't really care about anything else. So even at that point, it was like, well, can I even bodybuild? Like, now, obviously, he's chasing a classic pro card and things are different. But at that time, it's all very stressful. And it's like, can I even do this? Can I even train anymore? What severity is it? You know, am I going to be able to even pick up a weight in the gym? Or am I going to have another heart attack? Like, where am I at here? So for me, I was more concerned, not particularly about him ever bodybuilding again, but being a happy person and being like, okay, well, where does he sit in terms of what he's going to do? Because he at that point as well, I think things are maybe a little bit different now, but at that point as well, saw himself as like, he's an athlete and a coach, but that comes together. Like, him being an athlete breeds him being a better coach. And without being an athlete, he almost didn't want to be a coach because he resented the idea of other people being able to succeed in the environment he wanted to be in. So what do you do then as a coach when you've got that mental turmoil of like, this is something that I really want to be doing and I'm trying to help other people do it, but you almost resent them because it's what you want to be doing.
Right.
So it was a journey then of like, okay, well, let's come to terms with what's happened and then make a plan going forward, because I still believe, and this is like a testament now, that you can do anything you want to do in the right scenario, with the right guidance, with the right approach. And just because that happened doesn't mean that his journey was like completely over. And obviously now you can see that. It just meant that things had to be different, like a different route had to be taken, and a different approach. But for me, I was more concerned about losing him as an identity and like his mental health and not being able to bodybuild again, because my interest is his well-being, right? Not standing on stage, even though I know that's what he loves.
Yeah. And even if that's the case, like, you have to step away. Like, you have your own athlete journey too that you're pursuing in wellness, right? So
yeah, and it was a challenge last year because I competed for the first time in wellness last year in 2022, and that was the year obviously Cory had his heart attack. So January had his heart attack. About 2 weeks later I started prep. So we were then in a position where we were traveling internationally to Poland, to Spain, to Finland. We were traveling around for me to compete, and obviously sitting around waiting to go on. What are you doing? You're watching who's on stage. So Cory's just sat there watching supers, the heavies, the classic guys standing on stage battling for their pro cards, in a position where at this point he was going through a recovery journey, running TRT to keep him normal and help him through what he was doing, and going through like a weight loss, trying to bring his weight down, trying to get healthy, going through a pursuit of like not really progression, but like kind of regression in order to progress from a health perspective. But watching these people do what he wanted to do while I was competing, which is really difficult because I think that from a mental health perspective really took its toll over like the first half of the year. And that was something that had to be dealt with from like, I mean, you don't mind talking about it, but like a therapy point of view in terms of like overcoming that, because it's not my fault or anyone else's fault that he can't do what he wanted to do originally. And then starting to come to terms with that and then going on like a different pursuit, which is obviously what he's doing now, and trying to fall back in love with something in a slightly different direction. Yeah, and I want to challenge.
I want to bring it back to you in a second, because like we've had off-camera talks about like some of the therapy, and I'm a big advocate of it. I honestly think that most bodybuilders would very much benefit from the therapy environment. And like I myself, I go to couples therapy with Emily just to make sure that communication is always staying at a high level. You know, we go like once a month, but it's just like a nice little refresher course and a refresher button on communication systems and how to do that with each other and where do we fall short, and kind of bring that to the forefront. And I know that was something big for you, because it's like you're sitting on the sideline and that past rugby history kind of comes up and things like that. So 2 questions, like what was it that instigated you to think, I can do this in classic? Because that's where we're at now, 7 days out for you doing the Arnold. And for you, those that know, I don't coach Cory or Mads. They're just good friends in the circle. So,
although Luke has kind of coached me in a way to be able to continue what I'm doing.
We're going to come back to the knee pain in a second. But yeah, so like what was it that instigated it going in a classic, and then how was that dynamic managing it with therapy alongside it? Because I'd imagine that was something that kind of came about as you were having to sit on the sideline. Yeah.
I think the classic question was always in my mind prior to going into open and bodybuilding specifically. Okay. So when I competed as a junior bodybuilder, I was in a position where I was sitting within the weight cap pretty comfortably. But I wanted to be the biggest guy I possibly could. So I couldn't possibly justify, and then it was an education thing and certainly a guidance thing as well. I was sat at around 100 kilos pretty comfortably as a junior bodybuilder. I competed between 95 and 100 as a junior bodybuilder. I thought, thinking I was class C, thinking I was up to 6 foot, which I tell Mads still I am. I thought that being 93 kilos would mean that I was sacrificing muscle. So I was just like, well, I don't want to be 93 kilos. I don't want to be classy. I want to be open. I want to be 100 kilos and plus. So it was always something that I would have loved to been able to do. It just didn't fall in line with the plan.
Yeah.
Then naturally, and I think it comes down to your love for what you're doing and your ability to try and make something work. Right. So competing was not an option. Like, not competing was not an option. There was no way in hell that I could see myself moving forward in life without at least trying to find out if I could do that. Right. Stubborn, potentially, massively naive, over-optimistic, I don't know, in denial, which I think comes into play massively. But I was there in hospital like, what am I going to do? Like, the reality is, and the basics were, if I can't take steroids, if I can't be assisted and exposed to androgens, and I can't live at 120 kilos plus, then what can I do? What is the option?
Yeah.
What can I capably do? And I thought, right, well, if I'm going to have to pull my weight down anyway, if I'm going to have to reduce as much stress as I possibly can, if I land within a comfortable spot of in and around 100 kilos, I might be able to make that work.
Yeah.
So I just adapted. Yeah. Everything changed.
And I think it's been a massive blessing. We talk about therapy and we talk about like what coming to terms with the things that maybe you don't want to be a reality or things that have happened to you. I think that even though we don't wish that ever happened, it's been a massive blessing, because I think actually from a category perspective, it's where he sits better.
I would agree.
Yeah, 100%. That doesn't mean you couldn't put the tissue on, but Cory was taking a high amount of androgens, a high amount
to get there,
to try and get there, and was putting on size, obviously, but not at the rate that you would expect for the amount that he was taking. And I think that for the shape and the size and the aesthetics of him, like, this is actually the perfect scenario.
Yep.
And obviously, if he'd known that 5 years ago when, you know, he was a junior, or 7 years ago as a junior, I was like, oh, you should have done that. Things probably would have been different now. Probably already been a pro and things would have been different. But I think this has been a blessing that it's pushed him into this route. And also everything that else has come off the back of it, like with our coaching business and understanding and promoting more conversations about health, like what is necessary, what isn't necessary, you know, doing things like safely. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't take androgens to get where you need to be. Like, for God's sake, like, you need to be assisted in a lot of scenarios, that's fine, but making sure that you do these things right and making sure that you do look after your health whilst you're doing it, or just keep an eye on your health. Just make sure that, you know, I'm not saying that 130 kilo bodybuilder isn't going to have implications, of course they are, but just keep an eye on that. And I think opening the conversation of that for us has been super important and has been a blessing, I think, off the back of what's happened.
I think the development of me as an athlete and a coach has been a huge benefit. Like, it has been a blessing in disguise. I think, going back to your question initially about therapy and how that sort of played into it. So trauma has broken down to me very, very easily, and I've been exposed to trauma prior to my heart attack. So I'd already had exposure to therapy, which is probably good because I was already in that cycle of being able to process. But obviously, for someone who has dealt with trauma previously, and you go through post-traumatic stress disorder, and then post-traumatic growth, I was still in that process. So, and I'll be completely open and honest and transparent. I've attempted suicide. So my mental state wasn't a fully complete individual ready to face that. We'll face the reality of completely losing all control. So the process was actually a funny one, because, well, it wasn't funny at all, but it was an interesting process, because coming off the back of my heart attack, I had direction straight off the bat. And you know how as a bodybuilder yourself, how important that plan is.
Yeah.
When you've got structure in front of you, when you've got a roadmap, it's like, I'm on that.
Yeah.
That I can do that. That's fine. So I had to, I mean, I lived with stage 2 hypertension, 150 every single morning.
Yeah.
Every single morning. Saturation and stress was crazy high. Exposure to androgens was astronomical, which again, for any of you guys listening, understand, to be at an elite level, these guys grow from nothing. Like I've got, and I know you'll have guys as well, who you can expose to like level two risk exposure, and they can put on 10 to 15 kilos of muscle per year easily. It's true though. And I was running like level 4, level 5, level 6, if there was even that sort of level.
Yeah, there's not even that level on the calculation system.
And not being able to materialize that amount of muscle tissue. So you've got to ask yourself the question of where your scope and actual progression potential is. But I went through a process straight off my heart attack of, right, I've got a job to do. My job is to reduce stress as much as possible. I was eating 7,000 calories a day, doing over 4,500 milligrams of drugs. I was living with stage 2 hypertension and couldn't walk up the stairs without almost falling over. Yeah. Okay, brilliant. So all I need to do is pull my food. Any of those stresses, food, drugs, weight in general, all had to come down. So that was easy. Because obviously, what did I do? I just prepped. Right. Do you know what I mean? It was only when that denial phase of the trauma finished, and then I was into the processing phase of, oh shit, I've actually suffered, and I suffered 2 heart attacks. I suffered my first one in January, my second one in March. So when I came out in January, I was told that I would be okay. Obviously, we're talking about individuals and professionals within cardiology who don't know bodybuilding.
They deal with general people.
Right. I was in a position then where I could tell them more about androgen use than they could. Yeah. Right? They only knew the implications and what they were looking at from a cardiac perspective.
Which is not their fault fully, because they're not trained in that, right?
Of course not. No. So the simple direction was, right, anything you're doing to put yourself at risk, Cory, stop. Because otherwise you won't live till you're 30. I was like, okay, brilliant, super cool. So that was the direction I got given. But I was allowed out. I spent 7 days in hospital, and in March I was back in. So I was like, okay, shit, I'm not doing enough, because I still kept my food nice and high. I still held on to 120, like it was.
Yeah, it's not a good place to be when you've got cardiovascular.
This is it. So after going through that, realizing that processing phase, and this was when Mads was rolling through pro qualifiers every single week, and I was seeing guys, no word of a lie, that I'd beaten previously, win pro cards. I was resentful of the fact that people were able to do things that I wasn't, and that's when it got hard. And then obviously from there, it was just a case of continuing that therapy journey, being able to come to terms and really process the situation for what it was, and then be grateful for the situation I'm in, and then have purpose and direction moving forward.
I think to kind of bring it back to the coaching, because like there's a lot within that story that is very emotional and very triggering and traumatic, I guess would be kind of like the better word. Do you guys find that it brought you to continued education a little bit more aggressively? Because I know one of the things that kind of like drew me to you guys in Dubai was the questions that were being asked. They were very pointed, very accurate questions. You were very involved. You guys sat in the front of the seminar. Like I knew you guys were in the circle already, you working with Cal. And I didn't know who you were working with at the time. So, and knowing you work with Joe and all that. So, I think that's kind of where I see the development from the bodybuilding side of the equation, right? Because there's going to be personal growth, there's going to be relationship growth, but there's also going to be business growth from anything that happens from that. Because you talked about trauma pre-heart attack, which is more generally your situation around rugby. And I had not too far of a different situation with golf. And so like I recognize the mentality fairly quickly, right? It's a very athlete determined mindset. There's a couple aspects of it that we won't get into too much, but the continuing education piece, I think, is the part that I want to get into, because this is why I do it, right? It's like creating a group of individuals that systematically we all push the industry forward. Yes. And I think that's why I hate it when I see jealousy within the industry. It's like, I had the opportunity to help you with your knee in Dubai, right? And there's one of two situations in which you take that situation. It's like, you either ignore it because you're not my client and it's not my problem, so I don't worry about it, or you're a client of my friend in Cal, and it's like, oh yeah, I want to see Cal succeed, so I've got 15, 20 minutes to come point out a couple things and show you how you could potentially fix this, and now you're fucking pendulum squatting 4 plates. So it's like, that kind of experience I find creates the desire for continuing ed and community. And do you guys feel like that's happened off the back of that more than you were previously going in?
Yeah, I think so, 100%. This is kind of what I was coming on to earlier about the business growth, because it's pushed us, especially Cory and me, for different reasons, but I'll come on to that, to really try and develop and talk more about the issue around like health, around drug use, around educating ourselves more to be able to make sure that the people we're coaching are not put in any kind of compromised positions, and even if they are pushing that envelope, because there are risk factors to this. You know, you want to grow, like you are going to push androgen use, right? Yeah. But making sure that people understand the risks, we understand the risks and how to manage those things, and then improving our education with that and actually becoming quite passionate about it. But I think that's because we've suffered the consequences directly. People can talk about this all the time, and, you know, people can put stories up on Instagram and they can say, yeah, go and get your health check, go and get your echocardiogram. Like, have you had an echocardiogram, or have you seen the repercussions of a bad cardiac situation? No, you haven't. We've been in that. I've been on the receiving end of Cory, obviously emotionally, and then having to see him come through that, and ensuring that that doesn't happen to people that we know, and just generally like making sure that people who also don't understand about it are becoming aware that it's something they need to learn about. And I think it's super important for people to understand that. And the industry is changing.
It is. It absolutely is.
It is changing from conversations you're just hearing people have, podcasts like this being spoken about, people talking about their journeys, you know, seminars that you've been doing, you know, with John, the education portal at J3U, like putting all this stuff out. People have to listen. And the more and more that people talk about it, and the more we share and talk, the more people have to listen. And you can't just turn away from it and just do the whole old school bandito, if it works thing anymore. Like, it's not even acceptable. People ask too many questions now.
Yeah, I think, and just because I know I can tell you're about to talk, I think part of what I originally got into education for was to leave the industry better than I found it, right? That's kind of why I went into that space, and now it's honestly developed into growing the community as a whole now. Where I still think when I was in that place of leaving the industry better than I found it, there was a part of me, maybe from lack of maturity or whatever that may be, that was like, oh, I still got to beat these motherfuckers. And like, don't get me wrong, I'm a competitive guy. If you see me at a show, like, I'll be nice and all, but I'm coming home with the overall. But the reality of it is that I see us all moving forward by everybody pitching in and playing their part. Right, because no one person can change everything, but a massive group of people who are all bought into the same ideals can change an industry like that. And so I think that's where, like, as we grow, like as I grow, as John grows, as Cal grows, as you grow, it's like bringing those people into that circle that fit that ideal and live it on the day in, day out. They can now expand the ripple effect. When you drop that pebble in the water, the pebble is now a rock, and then the rock becomes a boulder, and then you got a whole system of people. It's that
whole pyramid theory, right? The top down, and you can share that, and the more that come into that and speak. I think it's the sharing of ideas as well. Yeah. Like, one person can't know everything, so you might know something, we might know something, Cal might know something, but the more you bring that to each other and have the conversation, like I might present a problem to you that you might be able to fix or have a conversation with me about. then that might happen with somebody else who you then go to somebody with a problem and a question, and then they can drop some knowledge bombs on you. And the more people share that and intertwine and the more conversations are had, the wider the knowledge, right?
So when you're in a position where you can't get clarity on your journey as an athlete, you're in a position where you're actually harpooned on an island with a lot of bad information, a lot of bad practice, that if you decide you like this industry enough to then continue to try and develop it yourself, which is massively popular in our industry, and be a coach, you get coached, you then become a coach, and then you teach somebody else to be a coach. The bad practice is what suffocates our ability to progress.
There's a lot of people that won't join in with, you'll do a seminar, you'll have a seminar in Dubai, okay? There are people who live in Dubai that potentially probably should have been at the seminar. Why don't they come? Because they know the way they do things, they like the way they do things, and that's fine. But that doesn't mean you know everything, and there's potential there to learn more, or even collaborate and have conversations and say, do you know what, that's interesting. Let's talk about this because I do it this way. Okay, well, now that's opened up a conversation for knowledge, exploration of different things. And that closed off attitude, I won't call it like egotistical. I don't think it's that. But I think it's like I also think it's the scarcity. It's not scarcity. It's a concern that people have that if they open the door there, they're worried that they'll reveal that they actually know very little. Whereas they're quite comfortable in their knowledge, and what works, and that's fine, and they do that. And as soon as they have a conversation or open the door a little bit and realise maybe they don't quite know everything, I think that there's a concern there. So people are like, no, I don't want to be part of that circle, thank you.
I do think that comes from a scarcity mindset, though, right? Like, I think that comes from a person who thinks that we can't all survive, or we can't all succeed and grow together and do that. And they live in that scarcity mindset, and they don't want to come to an event like that. And I think the more you open yourself to learning to anyone and everyone, and not tier yourself relative to other individuals, the more we can grow. Like, I think one of the most, I don't want to call it potentially eye-opening things for me, is like when you opened up about your therapy, you started talking about trauma and like the different kinds and using terminology that let me know that there is a very high level of understanding of trauma and how to get through that and how to process it, right? And it's like, I love communication and consumer psychology, and I spent a lot of time like looking into that stuff because I wasn't trained in college or in school. I have an engineering degree and a grad in exercise phys. Like, that stuff I've had professional training in, but this other stuff, it's like I've had to develop myself through business courses and psychology courses and stuff. And it's like, you just open the door to something else. Like, I have not come close to experiencing the trauma of like back-to-back heart attacks, right? And it's like, because of that, you now understand that and have that perspective and can empathize with people at a level that I can't, who have been through a situation that may be similar. So it's like, you have that conversation with anybody you meet. Like, they might have a perspective you don't have, and you can learn something that's going to make you a better coach in the end of the day.
And that is exactly how everyone continues to develop, right? Because you're in a position where not only are you able to support somebody who may face that reality, you're also able to prevent it as well, because the reality of elite physique development is a form of risk. You're taking people to Olympia. The reality of the risk that they may have to take to reach the top of the tree and the sacrifices that they may have to make is only in two people's hands. And that's you as a coach and the athlete.
Yeah.
Now, you need to be in a position, and this is where the overarching message needs to be consistent. We can achieve anything. We can also ensure that longevity is achieved whilst achieving those results.
Yeah.
You can get first, you can get an overall, you can get a pro card, you can go to the Olympia, no question, but only determined by your biological individuality and capabilities within that. If you as a coach, us as coaches, have an athlete that has not got the genetic potential to go to the Olympia, they should not be taking Olympia-sized risks.
Yeah, I'm just going to straight up tell them.
Straight up. You don't have the capabilities, unfortunately, to get to that level. So don't take the risk. Be a fantastic regional competitor. You can win overalls.
Yeah.
You may win a pro card, but I am not going to expose you to level 4, level 5, or level 6 if there was one that I created. Risk, because it's not worth it.
Yeah.
And the problem is the people and the coaches that are willing to take that risk for a potential trophy, they're the people that are dropping off.
I think this goes back to the reel that I posted today, which by the time this comes out won't be today, but talking about how like a coach's evaluations of someone's capacity within a class can save them a lot of that heartache and that trouble and put them in a position to be successful, right? And it's like you have someone who has like massive upper body, beautiful genetic structure up top, and then like they train legs 4 times a week and there's no lower body development or very little to speak of, right? And it's like that person trying to force themselves into bodybuilding, it's like you might just need to play the cards elsewhere, because to be able to get to just even standing on a national stage and being competitive, you're up in that high level 4 risk level, potentially. Like even if you want to go past what level 4 would be, like, 22 to 2,500 milligrams total compound use. If you go past that with a person, like that potentially may be what it takes for them, but you put them in a men's physique class and it's like they're already there, before they have to do even more work to potentially succeed in the pro ranks. So it's not an easy pill to swallow, because sometimes it's at the detriment of your business to tell them that they need to wait to compete for the class that they fit in, or they need to change the class that they're wanting to compete in.
Yeah. It comes back to the responsibility of the coach, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's like you may be doing classic years ago. But I think it all ties in nicely, even with that whole expanding knowledge, learning more, being a responsible coach and collaborating. Like all of these things fit into the same box, right? Like be responsible with your athlete in terms of what they're taking, their risk, and then also be responsible with your amount of knowledge and learning more. It's all one big thing. And you'll probably find that maybe the people who don't expand the knowledge and don't learn more and collaborate and become part of a good circle probably aren't being very responsible with their athletes in terms of giving them the right guidance, telling them about risks, and also making sure they're doing maybe the right category that actually would suit them, that would bring them maybe better results and less risk, right?
I think there is a confidence question there as well for a lot of coaches, and this is going to come down to lower tier coaches, unfortunately. There is, or they will feel like a snatch and grab opportunity. Yeah. Any coach, any client that they can hold on to, potentially get a result with, to validate them, regardless of their level of capabilities, they will try. So you get a lot of yeses from these coaches. Can I do wellness? No, you can't. You're a borderline bikini girl. You do not have the capabilities to compete in wellness next year or the year after. If you are willing to invest 4 years into the process of actually developing into a potential wellness competitor, brilliant, let's do that. 4 years, well, I've been told by another coach I can do it in 12 months. They're lying.
Yeah. Go on then.
It's for the money.
Yeah. I have that with girls. I have a lot of like amateur, quite young potential wellness girls come to me, and that's what they want to do, right? And I'm like, that's great. You can't compete this year, or probably not next year as a wellness athlete. If you want experience on stage, see if you even like it, we'll probably need to prep as a bikini girl this year or next year. Training like a wellness girl, yeah, but you're not going to have, you will then build probably enough tissue to be competitive in bikini. And then beyond that, you're going to need a few years. And people don't like to hear it, but it is the reality, and it's managing expectations of that.
I think it's so important too, right? And it just comes back to your situation. Like you get told that 5 years ago, maybe you're not sitting in the hospital bed, in January, right?
And I think having, there's nothing better than having willing and able clients, clients who just do. I am desperate as an athlete to progress, to achieve, and I will do anything, clearly, to be able to materialize the results I say I want, because I say I want them, and there's nobody, and this comes from lower level or younger aged elite sport. You get it drilled into you. Crazy, right? And Mads knows as well. And the reality is that doesn't change You are always competing. If you're competing from a young age, you don't know any different. So when I get given a plan,
you do it
all day. You could have told me that bag of dog shit on fire, if I ate it, I would win. I'd probably figure out a way to make it happen.
I call it chewing stinging nettles. I call it chewing stinging nettles.
Eat the shit.
Yeah. I will take another bite of that. Thank you very much. What it means I'm going to move forward. Brilliant. And the reality is, as a coach, your responsibility to pull the reins and slow it down is massive.
Yeah.
And the belief and effort that I put into my journey as a younger bodybuilder, completely delusional and naive, but desperate to progress. Someone should have grabbed hold of me.
Yeah, and educated you to the level.
I think at this point in the industry now, if that happened now, if Cory was a junior now, where the industry is, it'd be very different.
Yeah.
Like, the industry's come a long way in the last 5 years. Massive changes, growth, just because of the amount of people competing, the amount of people coaching, and then the level of the education of the coaches that have expanded. And I think like some of the best coaches and the best athletes out there are the ones who've had like a previous sporting background, like golf, right?
Yeah.
Rugby, football for me. Like, you know how to apply yourself because...
Yes, soccer for the American audience.
Soccer for the American audience. But yeah, the same. Yeah, definitely not football in America. Definitely not American football. Soccer.
You could play with it.
I don't know. You are called the Tank, right? So we could figure something out. Get some fucking football pads for you and just send you off.
Luke just gave me a large T-shirt, so I must be fun. But it's true. Like, they're the best. They're the best athletes because they just can apply themselves, right?
Yeah.
And they're the best bodybuilders. And I think sometimes go on to be the best coaches because work ethic is there. They understand what you need to do to be able to get somewhere. It's consistency every single day.
Willingness to be a student, as you said.
Yeah.
We know as younger athletes, there was always going to be someone better because it's a big wide world out there. When you compete internationally, when you even regionally, like domestically within your own country, and you realize, right, okay, well, if I play inside center and there's four quadrants of England, for example, that means there's another 3 of me and potentially 2 reserves. So that means there's 9, 12.
Yeah.
12 guys who are as good as me or better than I need to beat, and I don't even know who they are.
Yeah, I think it's that wake up call that has to be served to that individual sometimes. Like you said it, you find this out when you're young, right? I think I was 11 years old the first time I shot under par for a golf tournament across the entire tournament. So I shot like 71, which is 1 under par for each day. And I got waxed. I had a friend of mine who is just genetically that person, right? He like wiped the floor with me that weekend. He beat me by like 6 shots because he shot 67 the last day. And it's like, I just like literally went out there and put on a fabulous performance for an 11-year-old and just got my ass handed to me. And it's like, sometimes that reality is what needs to be served, right? And I think it's something, and just some of the younger athletes I coach, I think it's something that could be very valuable for those people that don't have the athletic background is putting them in situations where they do get beat. And in a gym environment, right? Like getting them into a training session where they realize like they're not hot shit because they're training with a 260-pound bodybuilder who's squatting 3 times what they are, right?
Yeah, and 100%.
I think it's really difficult. I'm very grateful, I know you will be as well, Luke, of the introduction to bodybuilding that I had. I trained in a shithole converted fire station with ex-Mr. Wales competitors, winners, hardcore, blood, spit and sawdust, Dorian Yates style bodybuilding gym.
So that's what bodybuilding was to you.
That's what bodybuilding was to me. And as a result, like, I couldn't eat no carbs. I'm fucking eating it now with ease.
Yeah.
And I suck it up all day, embrace it because it's hardcore.
Yeah, and that's what you want.
Whereas like now, and I don't want to sound, I mean, I'm 27 years old for Christ's sake, but I don't want to sound like a bitter old man, but it's not the same anymore.
Yeah, there's not as many.
There's not as many. The hardcore grit your teeth isn't really there because we as educated and developed coaches have found ways to make the process
more efficient,
more effective, more optimal. You've got push phases, pull phases. You've got timelines in place. There wasn't a timeline. You just stopped eating. Stopped eating, trained hard as fuck, took your gear and landed on stage.
Yeah.
And you did. And the reality is that's why people don't want to give up on that. Yeah. Because potentially it's the identity of being what bodybuilding really is. But now, coming into the 21st century of bodybuilding, 22nd probably to be fair, that the development is incredible, but you've got to embrace it. Because if you don't, you get left behind. And spending time with you, and apart from the fact that we get on like a house on fire for a million and one other reasons in bodybuilding, it's more about the idea of what environment, again, going back to God's country, King of Texas's boudoir, we're in a position where you can learn and develop so much, and you can actually narrow down that vast space of information very easily just by switching on and being a student, being willing to learn.
Bodybuilding is a science now, right?
It is, yeah.
Like, and I would say that you, like, from your previous background in engineering, that's opened you up to look at bodybuilding a different way, right? Like, it comes away from the old school way of looking at bodybuilding, and you're like, right, okay, well, I'm an engineer and I like bodybuilding. How can I look at bodybuilding? How can I engineer bodybuilding? Okay, right, well, understanding mechanics, understanding this, understanding that, looking at it from a different angle.
Yeah.
And that's now like your little niche, right? Like, you understand that, you teach people that, you've taught me a lot. Like, I was like, yeah, I'm strong, I can pendulum 5 plates, but now I've got broken knees. And you're like, okay, well, let's fix that. And that's because you do this. And I'm like, oh, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And that's because you've learned that, because you understand, like, it's a science. Like, you've applied your engineering head to bodybuilding and made it something that you can then teach other people. And like, I'm forever grateful, to be honest, because I thought my wellness journey was over forever because I thought I was broken.
I think the biggest comforting thought about the space that we spend our time in now, with the people we spend our time with and individuals and coaches, is the message is strong and it is consistent. Yeah. It's not gas. We're not preaching these new developed ways of coaching and then drilling guys with 700 mega trainer week. Like, we're actually putting these things into place. And that was the hardest thing for me, coming away from my heart attack. But prior to that, I would always use accurate measures on needs basis for approach with everything I did. But it was hard to justify that against coaches who weren't doing that and getting results, and also being able to justify that to the client. Well, I know X coach is getting these results and he's doing this and he's done it for longer potentially. I'm like, just wait. And now the tables have turned. Yeah. Because there's a lot of us now.
Yeah, I would agree. Very much so. I think that's a nice place to kind of start to wrap it up. I do have one question that is a little bit more lighter in the mood. And so you've been in the States for how long now? 7 days, 8 days? 8 days. What's the favorite thing about the States so far, coming from the wonderful lands of the UK?
Seeing you.
Oh, I'll get out of here.
I'm serious. Environment for me. It was a thing that initially sparked off our relationship in the first place. Yeah. Spending time with the right people. Being here in this environment, nothing bad.
I'm the Chick-fil-A.
I was gonna say, yours the Chick-fil-A.
The Chick-fil-A.
That Cory didn't experience.
He got to sit there and eat beef and asparagus.
I got the environment with the Chick-fil-A, sat around the table.
So you got to have your cake.
I literally got to have my cake and eat it.
And that is off season, ladies. That is what off season looks like.
Oh man.
No, I'm very, very grateful. It's been wicked to come over here.
Absolutely.
When I win the Arnolds next week.
Yeah. They'll be coming back just
We'll
for
be
the
coming
Chick-fil-A.
out. I'll definitely be coming out to see
Don't lie, you're gonna have Chick-fil-A in Ohio right after you step off stage.
Yeah, well, just send me the orders.
I'm gonna send you the order.
This morning, whilst eating his egg whites, he said, "Do you know what? When I come off stage at lunchtime, I'm gonna have Chick-fil-A, and then in the evening, I'm gonna go and find sushi." And I was like, "All right, okay then."
not that I'm celebrating before the job is done, but we'll.
Yeah.
I was like, "You won't though."
We'll be coming. No, I won't. No, I won't. To be fair.
Yeah.
There's always another job to be done, but we'll be coming back out here to celebrate 100%. Celebrate more than the win.
Yeah.
The new edition, which is going to be incredible.
Yeah. Yeah. That's scary but exciting. But
it's not scary. It's exciting.
It's both.
Both. This is probably. Is this the last podcast before?
This is the last podcast before. Oh wait, now I have one with John on Tuesday, but yeah, this will be the last in-person one before the baby comes in 8 days. Oh my God, 8 days.
Oh
Ooh, I need to get my shit together.
7 and 8 days out. He definitely doesn't. We've seen the nursery next door. It's immaculate. It's definitely ready for a baby.
Oh goodness.
The most educated anabolic baby.
Yeah, let's hope so.
With belts like Emily's and a brain like yours, wow.
Yeah.
That baby's gonna be incredible.
Don't shy. Emily's probably the smarter one in the relationship, if we're honest.
I know, but she's got better delts than you.
Yeah, she does have better delts. So I guess you could give me that. Technically, my GPA was better across undergrad and grad school, so we'll give me the win there. But for the audience, where can they find you guys so that people can...
Every social media tag will have Raw in it. So my social media, Instagram, Slee Raw. Our coaching brand is raw.coaching.
Yeah, mine is mads.raw. The same on YouTube, Raw Coaching. You can't miss it. It's a big red Raw sign.
Love it. Well, thanks you guys.
Thanks for having us, Luke.
And until next time, take no off switch in the pursuit of results.